Today we're taking a look at the Conqueror. This is a tier 10 battleship that I very rarely play. So today I'm going to take a look at it on YouTube. I think this ship is probably the original problem ship for me, where I started to question the direction of this game. And I'm not just going to only talk about that. The Conqueror is a really good ship. Honestly, the HE on this ship is unbelievable. It suffers from slightly poor dispersion, where ships like Montana with a similar set of 12 guns that don't have 30 millimeters of overmatch, right, 406 or 419, basically the same in the game, considering they have the same overmatch values relative to the cruisers and some of the battleships around them. So realistically, pretty similar ships, and yet the Conqueror has this incredible HE power, where it's got much higher alpha and fire chance, which honestly means you're going to be spamming HE, and you're going to see me do this pretty much exclusively this game. The armor piercing is actually pretty good too, but in comparison to the HE, it's just much less consistent. And consistency is nice to have when you can shoot at a super battleship doing 15,000 damage and a double fire. And yeah, by the way, we're already nearly at 50,000 damage. So the Conqueror really is designed to farm these battleships. But the reason the armor piercing is somewhat interesting, at least, is it has shorter fuses. So when the shell arms on a piece of armor, the Conqueror shell will explode sooner, meaning you're going to get less overpens on some of those light cruisers. So into a ship like a Smolensk, maybe you'll get a Citadel where Montana wouldn't. But other than that, really this ship is down to its HE power and this heal. You'll notice in the bottom left corner there next to my HP bar, the amount of healing I can potentially have is 43,000. Yeah, so even though the Conqueror has a lower HP pool, worse armor, it tends to be a pretty good tank and a very difficult ship to take down, especially considering it's so good at range still, as we're able to light another fire on this poor Hanover. It's a weird ship. It really is. If we're going to talk about the problems of it, I think we have to really see what ships have been in the game up to the point of Conqueror's release. We have the entire standard American and Japanese tech trees, so, not including Vermont or Worcester, those kind of lines, but the standard ones. Harugumo's not in the game either. I should definitely mention that as well. We can then get Hindenburg, Kaba, Moskva, Kurfürst, Minnow, Z-52, Grozavoy, Henry, and then Conqueror. And this is a very different Henry. Old Henry didn't have a reload booster. It was seen as a kind of mediocre ship, actually. Certainly wasn't the powerhouse that it became. And you see where Conqueror kind of doesn't fit the mold. Suddenly, you have a battleship that's not really designed to push and tank, like potentially a Montana, Kurfürst, or even Yamato is. Yamato's a bit of a sniper, but it has the armor to tank, at least into that old classic meta. And then the Conqueror comes out, and it's really not a good tank because the poor armor, and that it relies on tanking through healing, meaning you have to get through your heals. So it's really not fitting the meta there. And the other thing is, battleships up to this point, solely AP focused. Most people are never swapping to the HE. This is back when full pens on destroyers were a thing. Pretty glad they got rid of that, although I wish they had managed to give battleships a few more tools into destroyer YOLOs, but 20,000 damage at 15 kilometers out of a Montana into a gearing wasn't the most balanced or fun experience, so I'm glad they got rid of it. But this HE was just out of left field, in my opinion. The Conqueror could have been an entire line of Warspites. Warspite tier 6 battleship, very strong armor piercing. It was slow turret traverse, but had decent overmatch and very good accuracy. It would be like if Thunderer did not have really good HE. That would be kind of the equivalent, I would say. And I was hoping for a line of that. And then we got these HE spammers. And that was a really weird thing. And honestly, for me, where I feel like the direction of this game shifted very much away from pretty laid out and standard roles for cruisers, destroyers, battleships, and suddenly we're getting the idea that all we're doing is farming damage with high explosive into battleships. And that's what I'm doing this game, because, I mean, that's what Conqueror's role really is. Your goal is to just farm as much damage out of these battleships as possible, and every once in a while take a shot at a cruiser that's out of position, or potentially help your destroyers win some fights with the HE. And I really do think that the Conqueror idea might have been signifying some of the issues with the development of this game, where there's not really clear direction for each class, and moving some of the classes in between one another, the lines get a little blurred here. Conqueror plays a lot like just a big heavy cruiser, right? And then we're going to get later on, of course, into some ships that are cruisers that play a lot more like battleships. Way later on, right? Like with Petro and with Stalingrad, right? There's some pretty interesting crossovers there. And I don't know. I don't know if it's true or not, but maybe if there's a few more defined roles, potentially we would have a more interesting pushing meta and less of this sniping with HE at 20 kilometers meta. That's what I would like to think, but I'm sure there would have been other things to come up. But Conqueror in 2022 is still really, really good. It still is that original HE problem ship, in my opinion. And I don't get as much enjoyment out of it compared to playing a Montana and landing that perfect, devastating strike salvo. But every once in a while, these fires are pretty hilarious in how much damage I can really rack up so quickly with this HE. But if you're thinking of a battleship to get in 2022, and you're not particularly interested in some of the more armor-piercing, pushing-focused ones, you like to play at the back, you like to use HE, or maybe you just want to hang out and have an easier time of things, Conqueror is really nice for that. You really don't have to switch the ammo type, and the damage output is pretty ridiculous from the back of the map here. Even if you have the special commander, you can get an insane reload here on the Conqueror. When we get a Witherer with this commander, our reload is buffed significantly. So we're getting into that 22-23 second reload with very little adrenaline rush used. A very good tactic with the Conqueror is to run adrenaline rush and then, you know, take a bit of damage early game. Farm up some of that adrenaline rush. It's very easy to stay at half health or even a little below half health, giving yourself an over 10% reload buff, since you can always push your heal button and heal back 43,000 HP if things get a little bit stressful. That's often a very good thing to do in the early game. This game, I actually didn't end up taking all that much damage, but we still managed to get a pretty insane result. The other thing to notice about the Conqueror, and really a lot of the other ships in the line too, is the turret traverse is horrible. Just look at how slow this is. Montana, much faster turret traverse than this, and it's something to constantly be thinking about pre-turning your turrets. You'll notice, even though there were ships to shoot at down in the south, I was pre-turning my turrets for this vampire when he would show up, since I knew he would probably be flanking. And yeah, that's what, 12,000 damage from the HE? It's pretty devastating into destroyers, assuming the shells land. And that's really what it comes down to with Conqueror. The armor piercing is decent, but why would I switch away from this amazing HE ammo, which can devastate destroyers, cruisers, battleships, everything that comes into contact with this HE is going to take a huge amount of alpha and probably get lit on fire. As we dodge these torps, it's going to be leading into the end of this game, just a few shots to catch on the Conqueror yet. The shells do admittedly tend to float a little bit at range, so hitting targets at these longer ranges is pretty difficult, and even the dispersion gets quite a bit worse at these ranges. In fact, so much worse that in a little bit of testing for optimizing things in past Kings of the Seas, we actually tested whether or not it was better to run a Conqueror or an HE Montana firing at bow-in Moskva type ships at about, you know, around 20, 23 kilometers, that kind of thing, at super, super long range. Which one will do more damage with HE? And we actually found that, on average, Montana is going to do a better job than a Conqueror with HE at those ranges into a bow-on island-hugging Moskva, for example. This was a while ago, so it was mainly down to Montana's ability to hit more shells. Conqueror just doesn't have the good dispersion at these longer ranges, and it really shows even in these random battles where this Conqueror on the enemy team, we definitely do some good damage to him, but it's really because our shells just happen to land along his entire ship. The dispersion really isn't all that good. So playing that mid-range is very useful. This ship is very much a 15 to 18 kilometer ship. It excels in that area, and the very good concealment certainly helps there too. It's that 12, 13-ish kilometer concealment makes it very easy to play mid-range and be quite successful. We end up with 220,000 damage, all of that coming from HE, and the vast majority of that coming from battleships. Certainly the goal is to burn down battleships, and Conqueror does it very well. So while it's not my favorite ship in the game, certainly not my favorite tier 10 battleship, it doesn't mean it isn't extremely good. And if you're looking for a strong, easy to play tier 10 battleship, you can't really go wrong with Conqueror. You'll notice I am using Gunfeeder, because sometimes there are good opportunities to swap to the armor piercing, but mostly spamming HE tends to work out pretty well. I'm running Vigilance, and that's primarily down to how important this healing is for the Conqueror. Taking torpedoes basically is not healable damage, and when tanking and my ability to stay in the game is all based around the ability to have these massive 42,000 HP heals, taking torps is a really, really bad idea. So much so that I actually give up Grease the Gears for it. That's how important I think Vigilance is. And you could probably run Grease the Gears and be just fine, but in the games where I potentially could be taking more torps, where I need to tank more, I find it more useful to run Vigilance than to have the slight bit of bonus to my turret traverse. Personally, I feel like I can play around the poor turret traverse and pre-turn my turrets a lot of the time, but if you're struggling with that, Grease the Gears is a solid option as well. If you're wondering what I'm going to go with next, I might actually go with improved repair party readiness, since this ship's HP is pretty low, so getting this bonus percentage is pretty easy to do, and since we rely so heavily on our heals, it'd be very nice to reduce the amount of time it takes to get into them. Of course, Adrenaline Rush I do believe is much more important, and then the standard battleship upgrades after that. As far as the equipment goes, yeah, we're running Reload, running Prop Mod to try and juke some shells at longer ranges. I'm running Concealment System, and of course Accuracy as well. Pretty standard. There's really not much point, at least for me, seeing this Damage Control System mod too, since fire damage is completely healable, and this Specialized Repair Teams is a little bit good at healing back that fire damage. You'll notice the reload time though, 76 seconds. So keep in mind, in that time when you've just used a heal, you are vulnerable to dying. It's very easy to die in that 70, 80 second range between heals. The ship is not that tanky outside of its repair party. But that is the Conqueror. Let me know what you think of it in the comments down below. Hope you enjoyed watching this video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.